District of Columbia Court of Appeals last week, the stage is set for oral arguments in the case of Lugin versus the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration that will rule on the agency's recent restrictions on the granting of non-domiciled CDLs. Oral arguments will be heard September 15th in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. At issue is the February rule that limited the ability of states to issue a CDL to persons who were not domiciled in the United States, who are almost entirely aliens. The petitioners say the rule will render ineligible 97% of non-citizens who currently hold a CDL, arguing the regulation broadly prohibits all other lawfully present non-citizens, asylum seekers, asylees, refugees, and deferred action for childhood arrivals recipients from obtaining CDLs even though they are eligible to remain and work in the United States. Finally, the Middle East shipping lane that just started recovering from one crisis is now facing another. Houthi rebels in Yemen declared a naval blockade of Saudi Arabia in an escalating conflict that again threatens a key Mideast shipping route. On Monday, the Houthis on social media tied the action at the Bab al-Mandab Strait at the southern end of the Red Sea to what they called a Saudi siege and warned of escalation if Riyadh retaliates. Major container carriers only recently announced a return of scheduled services to the key shipping lane connecting Asia with the Mediterranean, Europe, and North America after Houthi terror attacks on merchant shipping in support of Gaza all but shut down the Suez Canal Red Sea route to global container lines starting in late 2023. The move raises the risk of wider disruption in the Red Sea and nearby shipping lanes, especially because Saudi Arabia is a major energy exporter and maritime traffic through the region is strategically important.
So, Julie, I think the biggest headline there, I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on. Middle East continues to be a contested area. The Houthis, they a couple of years ago started attacking these container vessels that were passing, and they're now planning to escalate. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously oil and energy, we'll talk with John about it later today and understand how that will be affected by this. But with both the Strait of Hormuz and now the Red Sea being affected by geopolitical unrest, that puts a lot of pressure on the Suez Canal. That's really the only route safely available potentially at the moment. So
I mean, container vessels are really their target because that's really what's passing. You know, Hormuz tends to move a lot of energy. The container vessels are passing through the Suez, and so that's what the Houthi are trying to attack. They're trying to disrupt this entire region. Is really, Iran and its proxies are creating havoc and retaliation of this battle. But frankly, the Houthis have been at battle with the United States and Western Europe really for the last couple of years. Have been really disrupting it ever since the Israeli war on the Palestinians, and so this is something that's been going on for many years. Just another escalation.
Yeah, I think that it's more geopolitical unrest that will continue to follow.
It's always, and then of course the other geopolitical story has to do with tariffs. I said it, and I'm going to regret it because I feel like I'm somewhat jinxing this world. Is the fact that it felt like Donald Trump may have been sort of moved on from tariffs, but we get probably one of the biggest tariff announcements is Liberation Day tariff is basically the USMCA had exempted a lot of products. That is, he's ripped it up. We talked about USMCA, the fact that the United States said they're not going to renew USMCA this year. It expired on July 1st, but now we have a whole new set of tariffs on products. And the list in terms of what is actually being tariffed is actually quite extensive. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I wasn't able to get a really clear total list, but I mean, I think obviously it's going to target automobiles, dairy, alcohol, a lot of the things that we
I'll tell you what I've got.
To ensure are protected in the U.S.
So automobiles and auto parts, this is really impactful. Shouldn't be it is a surprise because auto has such cross-border, that Detroit-Windsor area is a very significant auto producer. A lot of cross-border traffic that happens due to the auto sector. This is going to be tremendously impactful. Wine, beer, and spirits, so Molson, Not gonna be able to enjoy it without a tariff, and we're talking 50% tariffs. This is not small. Cheese and other dairy products, cement and construction materials. You know, the Canadian materials sector has been struggling this year, and if you look at rail volumes, in commodities has done quite well. Canada isn't experiencing the same. You talk to CP or CN, and they'll tell you that they're not seeing the same level of activity we see in the U.S. You can see this in the rail data. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Hockey sticks and sporting goods. You know, is that a surprise? I don't think so. And then other manufacturing goods previously benefiting from the USMCA duty-free treatment. These are excluded. Energy products. I think that should be a shock because there's a lot of pressure on energy. And frankly, that is such a lifeline to Alberta and other parts of Canada. Potash is used in fertilizer. It's used for farmers. Fish, critical minerals, and then goods already subject, this is like the steel tariff, the 232s, steels and aluminum, stuff that goes into auto manufacturing. Auto, again, is being impacted. Any thoughts here? And then civil aircraft really have enjoyed exemptions. There was last year when we had the Liberation Day tariffs, there was a lot of questions around the aircraft. But because Boeing is so important to America trade, you could argue Lockheed is also in that category. It tends to get a lot of sort of exemptions. Bombardier originally was having problems with its aircraft being certified in the United States. I believe that got resolved pretty quickly because Canada was actually obstructing American aircraft manufacturers. The United States retaliated it, and I think Canada figured it out really quickly that Bombardier is such an important part of their economy. They had to resolve it. But this is just, again, a continuation of trade disruptions that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think to put it in context, Canada is our second largest trading partner.
After Mexico.
Second to Mexico. Yeah. So the $20 billion, though, is really, if I'm right on the amount that we import, $400 billion a year, it's really 5% of those imports, right?
I think it's bigger than that. I think the number is $140 billion, but we'll try to get that accurate
we'll
number.
Get more information on. But I do think
I think the message here is the level of disruption that we're seeing, and the fact that if you're paying those tariffs, there's a significant tax on your business.
Yep.
And look, we've been talking about tariffs, all about China tariffs, because I think there's a national security interest. I don't have the same opinion of Canada tariffs. I think it's actually bad for supply chains and bad for U.S. manufacturing, reshoring, because ultimately Canada supplies so much raw material as well as assembly. So it's going to be disruptive, and this is going to be something that unfortunately we felt like maybe the administration moved on. Sad news into FreightWaves. Alan Adler, a reporter for FreightWaves that used to cover autos for FreightWaves, retired last year, has actually passed away with a bout of cancer. Alan was our automotive reporter, was very deeply knowledgeable about everything automotive, had a lot of context that provided a lot of intelligence to the automotive sector, the autonomous sector. Our thoughts are with his family, and dedicate this show to him today because he was a part of our family and was with us for many years. He will be missed.
Drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and crews who keep the world moving deserve tools that work as hard as they do. That's what Samsara builds, technology for safer, more efficient operations, made with the people who do the work. Samsara, built with operators for operators. Learn more at samsara.com.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do we. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D. Keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Welcome back. Hurricane season is underway, and even though we expect potentially a quiet season this year, storms can absolutely have major impacts on freight as well as manufacturing and shake up our supply chains. So we are happy to welcome Joshua Feldman, head meteorologist at WeatherOptics. So welcome, Joshua, and give us a little overview. What's the state of play right now? What is happening with this year's storm season?
So we have a very strong El Nino, and typically in an El Nino year, Atlantic hurricane season is suppressed. So when we mean suppressed, we're talking a lot about wind shear. We're talking a lot about sea surface temperatures, an environment that is very hostile to hurricane formation. So we have increased wind shear that prevents hurricanes from forming as they get towards the United States. However, Bertha is in the Gulf right now. The vast majority of hurricanes, they'll form out in the Atlantic, but about 15 to 20% of them do originate in the Gulf. And that is the case here with Bertha. And these Gulf storms are less impacted by El Nino than, say, the majority that form in the Atlantic. So Bertha is a moderately strong tropical storm, 60 miles per hour. And it's pretty close to the coast, actually. As of 11 a.m., I was just taking in the recent update. It was 70 miles south-southwest of Pensacola. And now typically, when we're talking about a tropical storm so close to the coast, flooding is on our mind, right? And you can see it's going to hug the coast and move very slow. I think the update said it was moving at 3 miles per hour. But fortunately, with this particular storm, it's asymmetrical. So the eye is actually displaced to the north of where a lot of the rain and wind activity are. So even though it is so close to the coast, that rain is mostly going to stay offshore, even as it gets towards like Louisiana and the Texas coast eventually by Thursday. So today, it's not really going to move much. Eventually, it'll pick up the pace, move towards the north-northwest. Throughout all this time, there will be scattered showers and thunderstorms that do eventually make their way into coastal Florida, coastal Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. However, they probably won't be particularly disruptive, with some exceptions. So, like any tropical system, the rainfall in the embedded storms is going to be very heavy. and the winds are pretty light. So what that means is areas that do get rain, they could get a lot all at once. And that could mean 1 to 2 inches falling within a few hours. And this thing is going to be sticking around for a few days. So it might be hit or miss for most areas, especially along the coast, along the areas that do get repeated rounds of thunderstorms. It could add up to a good 2 to 4 inches, maybe locally more of rainfall through Thursday, but by the time this thing is out of here. So the other thing to think about is storm surge. And we just saw that flood map. And really the only flooding we anticipate with this system is going to be right along the coast. The National Hurricane Center is expecting a good 2 to 4 feet of storm surge around the Mississippi Delta towards Mobile, Alabama. But that really means is coastal communities, they might be facing significant flooding, maybe some evacuations in really low-lying areas, but for the most part, this isn't really going to be that serious. As far as impacts to transportation are concerned, really as far as I-10 is about as far north as impacts will go, I think. There will be times where downpours reduce visibility. They'll be associated with these strong wind gusts up to about 40 to 50 miles per hour today and tomorrow before this thing weakens. And that will, of course, significantly reduce visibility. And there will be a small but notable risk of rollovers. So those are all some things to be aware of through Thursday or so before this thing either dissipates or reaches Texas and then dissipates. But this will be sticking around for a few days.
Josh, my understanding is that the flooding is always the bigger risk in these tropical storms, more so than wind. Although wind creates havoc, particularly if you have windows, but really the big issue is flooding. It tends to cause the most damage. Are you anticipating significant amounts of flood damage related to this storm?
Not with this particular storm, since most of that rainfall is going to be on the south. The main source of flooding is going to be that coastal flooding. But since it's weakening, we're talking minor to moderate storm surge, but that still could lead to significant impacts immediately along the coast as that flood risk shows. So most of the flood impacts you can see will be not related to rainfall, but due to that storm surge.
Well, the other thing that, we look at this region, it's a massively important part of our industrial economy because of the oil and gas production and refineries and chemical plants that happen along the Gulf Coast. Do you anticipate any disruptions in energy supplies or pipelines?
At this time, I don't think so. So if you pay attention to the cone of uncertainty, you can see how this thing is right now a storm of 60 miles per hour. But before it reaches Western Louisiana, Texas, where a lot of these oil refineries are, this thing is expected to weaken. As far as I know, there is a minor level of weather that these oil rigs are able to withstand. And with this weakening storm, I don't think that threshold will be reached throughout the Gulf Basin. And another thing to consider, Craig, is that the winds with this storm are already pretty closely confined to this storm center. And that radius where those winds are strong is only going to shrink further and further by the time it reaches a lot of oil drilling activity.
Well, it's a relief, Julie. I think
obviously we'll be watching this and other storms that come out through hurricane season. So as we're doing that, and as our viewers are doing that, is there a forecasting blind spot that you think most people miss that often catches them off guard with storms like this?
Absolutely. The things we've already talked about, storm surge and flooding, that I don't think get enough credit. But on that topic, So winds tend to be the headline. I mean, that's how we define these tropical systems, is the wind above a certain threshold. Little do we talk about the extent of the rainfall patterns. And the problem, especially with tropical systems, is a lot of times the rain is very closely concentrated around the eye. And well, that means it's very susceptible to changes in the forecast, right? Even a 25-mile shift in the storm track could lead to a substantial change in flooding. And I think, based off of my experience, I've lived through a few tropical cyclones in my life. I have family in Florida. The forecast will often call for an average or the worst case scenario, and that's important to prepare for, but that doesn't always happen. And when it doesn't happen, people tend to be complacent. So with the storm like Bertha, the rainfall could suddenly change, the forecast for rainfall could suddenly change depending on a few factors. So I mentioned it was weakening, but a weakening storm just refers to the wind, right? It doesn't refer to anything related to rain. There are a few, I would say, low likelihood forecasts that do show rainfall blowing up as it reaches the Texas coast. I don't think it's a high chance, but it's something to be aware of because a lot of South Texas has been recently battered by heavy rain. And if the forecast suddenly changes within 3 days to call for heavy rain, it's susceptible to it. And if you're not prepared, significant impacts can lead to a lot of damage.
Well, Josh, this is going to be hopefully not a major set of hurricanes, but that forecast has been off before. I mean, a couple of years ago, the National Weather Service and NOAA predicted one of the largest tropical storms and hurricane seasons on record, and it was kind of a non-event. We didn't have really significant storms that ended up hit the United States. You talked about the El Nino not bringing a lot of storms. Do you think that's going to hold?
I think especially it's going to hold. So Colorado State University, every month they put an updated forecast for hurricanes. Each month it gets lower. There's a few reasons for that. El Nino is even stronger than anticipated, which means more wind shear is forecast. And then there's actually another phenomenon in the Atlantic. You could say Atlantic like Nina, cooler waters over the Atlantic. Remember, hurricanes like warm water. So that's more of a concern for hurricanes that go up the East Coast, not necessarily storms that form the tropics. But that's yet another level, another barrier that a hurricane or just a tropical wave will have to face before it reaches the United States. So I do think that we'll have a below normal season. But Craig, it only takes one hurricane. We just need one for this to be an active season.
That's true. I mean, we're definitely dealing with the low-lying area in New Orleans, which could be certainly impactful if we have a dead-on hit. The other thing is, as we're talking about what's happening around weather, these wildfires in Canada are certainly causing health issues, breathing issues. I was in Wisconsin yesterday. It was interesting. I was flying over and you couldn't see the ground. We got there, it cleared up a little bit. There was a lot of wind. In the Southeast, it's rained almost every day, and it's set to rain for the next week. I mean, it's like every single day, it feels like a monsoon. Do you anticipate the weather being pretty consistent through the fall?
I anticipate, at least for the next couple of months, this pattern where we have unusually high pressure that's situated farther north than where it tends to be ever, like in the summer. Part of the reason why these fires were so large and persistent is we had hot, high pressure situated all the way up into the plains, into the Canadian prairies. I think it'll swing like a pendulum from time to time. I don't think we're going to have consistently stable, normal weather, so to say. Certainly the South was in a drought. There will be a time where this rain is no longer going to be beneficial, but there will also be times when the pendulum swings just enough, like it is right now, for rain to fall on those Canada fires. Hopefully it persists, but we still have another month and a half left of this. And around today is the peak, the hottest time of the year climatologically. So the pendulum has swung in such a way that at least as of last week, the West Coast was baking, and now there's a lot of fires out in Oregon, and those will be causing problems throughout the rest of the summer, I would presume. And unlike Canada, that part of the country does not typically get rain in the summer. So smokiness and wildfires will only grow more concerning throughout a lot of North America, unfortunately, through the fall.
Well, Josh, thank you so much. We'll have to have you back as we get some storms that are worth watching. This is hurricane season. Always a reminder that people in logistics, we're always having to respond to these events, whether they're wildfires or hurricanes. And I've done my duty of on-ground logistics service. We're actually going to talk about that on the Sonar Update here today, just what this means from the hurricane and overall hurricane season.
And quick reminder that within the Sonar UI and our platform, you can access this data.
WeatherOptics is there.
Via WeatherOptics in our risk management module within our tool, and it does track hurricanes as well as other disruptions. My favorite part about is wildfires. They released a new product yesterday, I believe. And my favorite part is there also is a business disruption index. So different types of weather have different business, disruption impacts in different parts of the country. So really a great tool and a great thing that you're able to reference. So with that, again, thank you, Josh. And let's get into the Sonar data and today's Sonar Update.
Storm Bertha is brewing in the Gulf of America. And really, it's a reminder that this is hurricane season. Hurricane season kicks off in June 1st and runs all the way through November, but it's really the second storm that we've had that's been named. You can always tell what order they are because they start with A and we go B and then beyond. And Bertha is the first one to really cause headaches in the Gulf. And really, as a tropical storm, it hasn't really hit hurricane status and is not expected to, but it will cause some problems, particularly in places like New Orleans, which is below and subject to flooding when you have a significant hurricane. Now, this is not Katrina, so we're not going to see a significant damage the way we saw during Katrina, but tropical storms can create a lot of damage. Tropical storms can create a lot of flooding, and ultimately the winds are actually less of a risk in a hurricane. It's all the flooding that you worry about. So it's just something that we should all keep in mind because it will be disruptive to the overall freight market. And hurricanes and tropical storms do have a pretty tremendous impact on the composure of the freight market because they create a lot of havoc. They shut down production in terms of manufacturing and distribution during the storm. They also cause a lot of surge before the storm in terms of relief product. Home Depot sets up a whole war room and brings in an enormous amount of product to prepare for these big tropical storms and hurricanes, things like plywood, duct tape, batteries, gas cans. It's all needed during the preparation of the storm to prepare homes for the potential flooding and potential high winds that are likely to hit during a major storm. Then you get the relief, which comes from largely FEMA and the grocers. You see companies like Publix and H-E-B and other grocers as well as Walmart that are doing a lot of relief, but also FEMA and the states. Now, New Orleans and Louisiana doesn't have a great track record in dealing with big storms, as we saw during Katrina. It's not like Florida. Florida is far better prepared and frankly world class at dealing with these storms. Louisiana does not have a great track record, and so it could create some problems. And the bigger risk here, of course, is energy. Energy, this is running through the most important sector in terms of the industrial economy in the United States, the energy and petrochemical sector. And it does tend to shut down these big rigs. So this is going to go right through the heart of the energy sector on the Gulf Coast, and that will create some problems. Could shut down pipelines. We could see some disruption in terms of energy production, refineries. And if there's flooding or damage, it could play havoc on energy markets, particularly those already stretched due to Hormuz. So this, in some ways, could have an outsized effect on the industrial sector and on the energy market in the United States due to the already stressed sector due to Hormuz, and therefore it could be something that is far more disruptive than what a typical tropical storm would be. Now, the interesting thing about the path of this storm is it's going to really go across southern Louisiana and stay on the coast, and that's going to accumulate lots of water and energy, and then head towards Galveston and Houston. At least that's the current trajectory. And that is a bigger concern. Houston is a far more important economic center, both for industrial activity, but just consumers. And anytime you have these storms that end up hitting these bigger cities, that creates more problems and potential more disruption. The good news, it is not a very strong storm. It's not a hurricane status, and nor is expected to be. But as we've learned, or at least monitored, tropical storms can easily turn into hurricanes and gain a lot of force over the next couple of months. It's all dependent upon temperatures. Now, this is the second storm of the season. We do expect more storms. This is expected to be a lighter or a lower number of storms this year in terms of the Atlantic Ocean, simply because of the El Nino that we have this year that actually is not expected to create as many storms. But it's something to keep an eye on. And as we've learned with any big tropical storm season or hurricane season, is that these things can change pretty quickly. So we're going to keep an eye on it. In terms of tender rejections, they're hovering about 15.5%. We do expect with a storm hitting, particularly this part of the country, is that it could create some havoc on freight markets, and frankly, routing guides can break. And as routing guides break, our sponsor, RXO, would like to remind you that they have a capacity now hotline available when your normal regular carriers are not available. So when they turn down freight due to the fact that they're dealing with this tropical storm Bertha, or putting trucks out in other parts of the market and aren't available when those routing guides break, RXO has created a capacity hotline to help you out. We're going to keep an eye on this and monitor all tropical storms and hurricanes over the season, and you can find all of this data. This map is directly inside of Sonar. You can find it in the risk management section of Sonar, and keep an eye on the storm. I like this version. This is the Everstream version. We also have the WeatherOptics version. Frankly, I think it visualized better, but you can get both of those. Any Sonar Core subscriber can access these. And really, this time of year is, I think, when you really want to have that information, because it will tell you as the storm builds, the path, and so forth. Well, you know, it's interesting when we do these things live. He's a meteorologist. This is his full-time job. Mine is to comment on the freight market. I think the bigger note from that is to talk about the season. Yeah. Hurricanes are always disruptive. This storm, it appears from what we heard, is not going to be a big issue. I think he's correct that a lot of the oil rigs are prepared to deal with these types of storms. So that's recurrent. That's why we go live.
Yeah, but I think that the one takeaway I had is, as we prepare for hurricane season and think about where potential disruptions will be, probably less worried about the Atlantic coast, more of an eye to be kept on the Gulf and the ports. A couple years ago during Harvey, Houston had a major. In fact, it was a catalyst for the 2017 freight market, which was one of the best freight markets we've had in history up until that point, because we've had some great markets since then. But 17 Harvey was sort of the catalyst that brought us, and that was early August when we saw that. So we certainly could relive that again. And you know, as he mentions, you only need one storm. Like, you don't need. Remember back in 2000, I think it was 2003, 2004, I can't recall, but there was something like 4 back-to-back storms that hit Florida that were Category 3 and above. And it was just one after another, and it was massively disruptive. So yeah, one of them was during my bachelorette party in Destin. We had to evacuate.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I'm sure that was.
It was fine.
It's fine. So we'll be right back with more from FreightWaves Today.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do we. Wheels on the interstate, boots site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D. Keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. You know, one of the great things we have in Sonar are these things called set reps. They're basically long form tier one consulting style reports done by our market analysts and experts here at FreightWaves Sonar. And really, it's a chance to dive into different topics. And we've got one on the U.S. industrials. So the question that's been popping up a lot is how impactful is the war in Iran on U.S. industrials in the economy? And we attempted to take an answer at that. And a lot of it comes down to how well positioned the United States is with energy, particularly natural gas, which is the fuel of choice for the U.S. industrial sector. And it puts us in a really solid position to benefit from as the rest of the world is impacted in energy, the United States, because of our plentiful oil supplies, as well as our neighbors in Canada, Mexico, and Venezuela. You can source energy without having it disrupted the way other parts of the world are. And so we go into this in our sit rep. You can find it on Sonar, and it's really a 30-page plus report on the impact of the war and what it means for U.S. industrials.
Yeah, so I wrote this one back in April. So I spent a little time just doing some research to ensure that it was still up to date. But the core thesis really does hold, and it's that it's widening the industrial cost advantage for the United States, right? Natural gas prices have remained low.
Well, they keep dropping due to, and we're going to talk to John Kingston, our energy expert here shortly, but natural gas prices actually drop when you have higher oil production because it's a derivative gas, which means that as you drill for more oil, you get more natural gas, and companies flare it off. They burn it off, and largely the reason they can't transport it, in some cases they have to pay to transport it or pay to have it removed. Other cases they flare it off because they want the oil.
Right. Well, and as oil prices rise, right, more U.S. drilling occurs, which provides more insulation for U.S. and continues to raise rates elsewhere in Asia and in Europe, right? Yep. So that has been certainly beneficial. So obviously war is nothing that we, any of us, it's unfortunate, and I don't think it's anything that we hope for. But from an economic and a freight standpoint, I mean, it is good for the for freight. And we're seeing it in defense spending as well. And
$1.5 trillion proposed budget. Matt Leffler and I went over this on Freight Expectations on Friday, is the impact of the new defense bill. That's a $500 billion increase in defense spending, of which 85% goes into procurement, which is weapons and munitions. And that drives a lot of industrial activity. Plus you get the defense basically, there was an executive order to increase infrastructure and defense spending, as well as in infrastructure, natural gas, things like that, which will drive a lot of industrial activity in the United States.
Right. Over $1 trillion discretionary budget with $350 billion mandatory, right? Ordering more Tomahawks and other things, procurement, large increases in SM6 and some other things are along those lines. So we're seeing that. The bottom line is, structurally, this is a multi-year freight demand story tied to energy cost, industrial policy, and defense spending. So not just a short-term spike, but we'll be replenishing weapons and all of the things for defense spending for quite a while as well. And it's a massive, truckload increase as well. We estimate as many as 6 million incremental truckloads through 2031, with most of them being flatbed for a lot of this defense spending.
So flatbed bullish. You have the energy, you have natural gas pipelines. This is something that's getting built out. And as you have these energy disruptions, I mean, look at what happened in New York when you had this heat wave. They were asking people over Taylor Swift's wedding weekend to basically shut off their air conditions.
And we never talked about that, by the way. And you're kind of a Swiftie, her wedding.
We talked about it. I don't think you were here.
Oh, it must have been with Malcolm.
Malcolm and I talked about it. But the heat that you had, because New York has not built out energy infrastructure, is something that we're constantly reminded of how important energy is. And there's no better person to talk about this topic than our energy reporter, John Kingston, who is the king of energy reporting. Mr. Kingston, how are you, sir?
I didn't think I was going to be on already. I wasn't ready. Okay, here I am.
Well, John,
ready now.
Bring you in. I follow the instructions that are on the screen, and they tell us that you're on. So,
all right, okay.
Welcome to FreightWaves Today. Back, let's talk about energy. Let's talk about defense spending and infrastructure. A lot of conversation about energy in the United States and the importance of it. I mean, 40% of heavy industries cost is actually energy related. This is a big stimulant for U.S. industry. Any thoughts on that?
You were talking about natural gas prices before. I'm a little surprised that gas in the U.S. has not moved higher, and I guess that's probably a constraint of the ability to transport gas to the Gulf Coast and turn it into LNG and export it somewhere else, because certainly it could be used. There's plenty of places that would love to have that LNG, given the drop in supplies out of the Middle East. And I always assumed that, and I think for a while there, that was the case, that over time, that U.S. natural gas prices would maybe not completely normalize, but normalize more with the rest of the world, and LNG being the big bridge to that. And that hasn't happened really at all. I mean, if you look at the price of Henry Hub natural gas futures, right? I think the last time I looked, which was yesterday, they were under $3 per MCF. Not really sure what the global price of LNG is, but it's a lot higher. So I'm kind of surprised that that hasn't happened more. And to your point, then, that is actually very good, because that kind of low price energy source that comes from natural gas can remain an ace in the hole for the United States. And I didn't think that was going to happen. Then, of course, you also have the fact that coal is going through a significant revival, that some of these big giant data centers who are looking at electricity tightness and the ability to get enough electricity to run their facilities are starting to talk about coal plants again. And we thought that that was pretty much passe, and that was a fuel of the past. Probably still is in the long term, but it may very well make a revival in the U.S. to generate enough power to run data centers. So we're pretty well. I mean, I would say this. We're pretty well equipped. We're pretty well situated. But in the case of oil, we're always going to be tied to the global market. whereas gas, not as much. And again, to my point earlier, I'm a little surprised at that.
Well, coal shipments are down year over year. You can see this in the rail data. So we haven't, even though there is some conversation about the hyperscalers using coal energy, it doesn't appear to be having a big catalyst in terms of coal shipments. And you see that in the rail shipment data. So I often wonder when the media, the broader media loves to report on coal because it's such a toxic gas and fuel source in the mind of most media reporters, because it is a dirty fuel compared to other forms of energy. But we're not seeing a renaissance of coal, regardless of what the message is out there. But I want to talk natural gas because, John, again, you've been reporting this a lot longer, and I know a fraction of what you know about energy. But my understanding is that we have so much natural gas in the United States that we're literally swimming in it. And the producers can't, because it's an associated gas, a derivative gas when they drill oil, that they're flaring it off because they have so much of it. And that's the reason that as we see higher oil demand domestically and oil production, the potential of the oil production domestically is that is driving the natural gas price lower.
Yeah, it's always been an issue with infrastructure to get the gas from where it was to where it needs to be. There is flaring that goes on in various parts of the country. I know North Dakota, of course, their oil production I think is a little down, but their oil at their peak, they were flaring a lot of gas, and you don't like to do that. So the question of takeaway capacity is very much there. We have more gas in this country than we really know what to do with, and it's been a long-term problem. I kind of would have thought it might have been solved by now. But getting that pipeline infrastructure in place and also the gas plants to treat it, to extract the NGLs, continues to be an issue.
I had the opportunity earlier this year to go to, it was a conference put on. It was a supply chain guy that was there, and there was a top 100 oil and John, you would have been right at home with the natural gas and oil companies that were there and the CEOs. And it was interesting because what they were largely talking about was the lack of permitting, the slow permitting process to build the infrastructure, to move the gas off the fields, to put it in there. And just talking about the fact that nuclear, the timeline to bring on nuclear plants is so substantial. The Department of Energy Secretary was there, Chris Wright was there in attendance talking about this, is that while everyone is really, nuclear is a very sexy topic, natural gas is going to be the thing that drives a lot of the energy production in the United States. And really everyone was talking about the fact that they anticipate more and more natural gas. And so it's a little different than what you're talking about. I'm curious, why do you think that natural gas prices would match more global prices? Because that's not what I took away in the conversations that I saw with this at this energy conference.
I guess I'm reflecting a view that I may have had years ago. I mean, the view actually kind of first formed in my head when the U.S., let's say in the early, get my years straight, let's say the late aughts, was viewed as probably going to be a major LNG importer. And I always felt that the U.S. prices would normalize with the rest of the world because to import LNG into the U.S. from somewhere else, you would have to match the world price. Well, obviously, the fracking revolution comes around. This is no longer an issue, and now we're a major LNG exporter. I thought that we would normalize a little bit more because I guess I assumed, but to your permitting point, I assumed that there would be more infrastructure built to take natural gas down to the Gulf of Mexico, where it could be liquefied and turned into LNG and exported wherever. And that has happened to a large degree, but it hasn't happened maybe enough that we still don't need to flare someplace. And who knows, if you could take all the gas that's being flared and turn it into LNG, maybe you'd have a lot more normalization of prices. That is the economics 101 anticipation, but the real world kind of stepped in and made that a lot more difficult.
John, let's talk a little bit about the EIA weekly petroleum status report. Let's talk a little bit about the headline numbers of this week's report. Sort of what you see, what stood out.
Well, I mean, the price went up. The price is now up. I want to get the number up in front of me, okay? If you don't mind, give me a second. The price is now up. To me, the headline number is it's up to $5.13.4. It was up 33.8 cents this week. combined with what it was last week, it's now up 55 cents in just 2 weeks. This is, I know, Craig, you talked about how a higher fuel surcharge is actually really good for some of the oil companies. A higher price is good for fuel surcharge revenue. But I got to think that these kind of prices, if you're an independent owner operator, you booked a load maybe a week ago or so, anticipating maybe a different price of diesel than you're going to actually pay at the pump. So
John, let me interrupt you, because I had a conversation with somebody who is in one of the major associated with one of the major truck stops, and what I learned is a very small percent of owner operators today. This has changed, as I was told, really in the last 5 years. A very small percent of owner operators, just a couple percent, are actually paying the retail price. Almost everybody, and it's because of the introduction of apps like Mudflap and others, and all these discount programs, the factoring companies have really got into it. It's a very small percent that is paying retail. It's interesting because it does, when we talk about the fuel surcharge, if only a small percent is paying retail prices, then it means that number is really a misnomer in many ways, because everyone's sort of paying rack or some derivative of rack, cost plus. But I thought that was a really interesting thing, because it's different. You know, I was in fuel cards for 10 years. It is a very different, because in the days when I was really in the fuel market, it was more than half of people were paying retail. That's no longer the case, is what I'm being told.
Right, but wouldn't the rate of change in these discounted prices pretty much match? It would need to match the rate of change in the outright price, I would think. Even if they're paying discounted, it's still moving up, right?
Yeah, but if you're billing under, if your fuel surcharge is being built under a retail price,
Right,
and you're paying wholesale, then you're getting the benefit, effectively an arbitrage of, even if it's moving up during that period, the spread on that is actually, you know, it's a pretty substantial spread between the two numbers. And I think that's why you
wholesale is going up more quickly than retail.
Wholesale, retail goes up.
But this week it hasn't risen as quickly. I mean, as when I looked at it yesterday, wholesale was the spread was wider. Wholesale was going up more quickly than.
What is the wholesale spread? I'm going to look it up.
I had it yesterday, and of course I cannot remember it.
I mean, it was $1.55 a gallon when I looked at it last week. But so John, where are we at in terms of oil prices right now in terms of expectations?
Well, the point here, and it's in the story that's been published on FreightWaves.com, is that the products market is really where it's at. So if you just look at the front month Brent price on CME NYMEX, and you look at the front month ultra low sulfur diesel price, again on the same exchange, it's been running about 2 times. Diesel 2 times over the price of Brent, and that is unprecedented. Like Jeff Curry has been the kind of the loudest voice on this. He's the former head of commodity research at Goldman Sachs, and now he's kind of off on his own. He's been saying he's been in the business 30 years. He's never seen anything like this. And Matt Smith of Kepler made a comment on CNBC yesterday, noting that crude supplies, that crude demand is down because a lot of refining capacity is down. Either it couldn't get the oil, or it's behind the Strait of Hormuz, so it's shut down. As a result of that, you've got this crazy imbalance where it looks like there's plenty of crude in the market, but that's because a lot of demand has been cut out from underneath by the war. And meanwhile, out in the great world out there, you've still got demand for products. So you have diesel running twice the price of Brent on the futures market. I'm not sure what the ratio on gasoline is. You were talking earlier about hurricane season. We get some big, nasty hurricane that takes out a lot of refining capacity. It's kind of scary to think what's going to happen, because this is not a market that's prepared for that.
Yeah, we did talk about that. I mean, Go ahead, John. Sorry.
I was going to say, right now the markets, that system is completely at the mercy of what might happen. There's really nothing you could do to plan it. The data shows that U.S. refiners are just running as fast as they can. At a certain point, you can only do that so long. They say that the overall refinery rate in the U.S. right now is running at 95 to 96. And most experts will tell you, you really can't push it to 100. I mean, if you are, you're just putting a lot of strain on the system. And then you got to worry about something really bad happening. Something that takes a unit down for weeks or something.
On the headlines, we talked about the Houthis now resuming or accelerating their attacks on container vessels that are passing through the Suez or through the Gulf. What is your view in terms of this acceleration? We got announcements over the weekend that Iraq is going to increase substantial investments in infrastructure. Saudi Arabia has made substantial investments in their pipeline capacity. UAE is talking about a new port. It feels like everyone's trying to route around these bottlenecks. John, I know this is not a short-term relief, but it does feel like the world is starting to price in and prepare for these sort of perpetual problems in Hormuz and in the Red Sea. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, a short term, let's talk about the Houthis. I mean, they're really not talking that much about just going after shipping in general the way they did several months ago. They're talking about going after the Saudis, and in particular, that East-West pipeline that you made reference to in Saudi Arabia that takes oil to a place called Yanbu, which is, I'm not sure if it's north of the strait or south of the strait, but whatever it is, I mean, it's very, very, very vulnerable to Houthi attacks given where it is relative to Yemen. This has been kind of an exit that the Saudis have been able to use. Quite frankly, I was kind of surprised to learn at the start of the war that they really hadn't been using that pipeline a lot because increasingly more of their supplies are going to Asia rather than going west. So they were able to. It's easier. It would have been easier for them to export out of the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz and then to Asia and Japan or wherever. But now, because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, they want to go out of Yanbu. Yanbu is very vulnerable to Houthi attacks. So on the one hand, I think in the long term, trying to build pipeline capacity away from the Strait of Hormuz will probably pay off. But I mean, it's notable that Yanbu pipeline had hardly been used at all prior to the war. And if a country's going to look at the investment there, they may be looking at investing in a pipeline that, if everything ever returns to normal in the Strait of Hormuz, they'll probably start using that again because it's just got a lot of economic advantages going that way, particularly if Asia's your biggest customer base, than going somewhere else. So how much money are they going to sink into a pipeline that might very well sit empty a lot, as the Yanbu pipeline was sitting before this? I don't know, but that's got to be a consideration. Unless their attitude is just, damn the cost. This is an insurance policy. We'll pay it no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're so dependent. Saudi Arabia is so dependent on oil. I mean, they've got these massive infrastructure projects that are going on. The line, of course, it has been moved to, a data center, I think is the change. You've got, was it Nome, this sort of city, futuristic city that they've talked about. These massive infrastructure projects in Saudi Arabia, it needs high price of oil. So in some ways, it feels like Saudi Arabia is at least pricing in higher oil because they need higher oil. And if you look at least what the public reports are saying, the neighbors that are most impacted by these attacks are very much on the side of continued conflict. They want Iran isolated. They want the United States to keep the pressure up. I think some of this is economically driven. If you have geopolitical conflict, it drives up the price of oil. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's hard for me to. That's kind of an old argument about they like to see. I mean, basically, what's going on in the war is eliminating the job of OPEC. Remember, OPEC's goal is not to drive prices higher. This is going to sound like semantics, but it is to restrain glut. And certainly, the war has taken that job from OPEC. OPEC doesn't need to do anything. So, in that sense, it's better. I don't know if they think that longer term higher prices, they might be good for their budget in the short term. But they look at statistics like 25% of all new car sales are electric. In China, which is the world's fastest growing market, I think it's between 40 and 50. And they do get concerned that really high prices are going to spur that. Look, before the war started, every single model, for really, quite frankly, a couple of years, every single supply demand model projecting out, like the IEA or the OPEC model itself, would say demand for the marginal barrel is weaker than it would have been otherwise as a result of electric vehicles. So the fact that they're collapsing in the U.S. and the fact that they're just a small percentage is, I'm not saying it's not relevant, but it's more than offset in terms of an impact on the market by all the sales in Europe, all the sales in China.
Yeah, something like 25% of new cars, John, globally, and this is not the United States, is actually electrics, with China sort of leading the charge there. I mean, it is interesting because EVs are taking over and taking its play. If you go back to 50 years, 60 years ago, where really a lot of this stuff, we saw really what OPEC was dealing with 50 years ago, where you had the collapse in oil prices and what that meant for their overall economies. They certainly were afraid of stifling the global economy and end up seeing derivatives and alternatives come out. And so that certainly is probably on the radar of a lot of these countries, but they're still petrostates. They still need high energy prices to fund their post-petro economies. And that's one of the reasons they're spending so much money on these big projects, is to really prepare for a post-petro world.
Yeah, but they kind of like a Goldilocks price, not too high, not too low, just right to keep demand going, to keep people saying, you know what, I think I won't get an EV this time. I'll stick with gasoline because the price isn't that bad. I can fill up in 2 minutes, that kind of thing.
You sound like Landman. I think we learned that on Landman, how we need the perfect price, not too high, not too low. Well, John, it's always great seeing you. We'll have to have you back. Stay with us, FreightWaves Today. We are going to talk more about the fuel market. We have Brian McGowan. He is with Armada. They are a major supplier to the restaurant industry. And we're going to get into all that shortly.
Every load you move depends on one thing, knowing who's on the other side. And Highway gives freight brokers the carrier identity tools to verify carriers, secure the load, and book with confidence. The performance guarantee puts up $100,000 behind that promise. Real money behind the standard. No other freight technology company has made that commitment. This is, again, Highway, the standard for carrier identity.
The world doesn't wait. So neither do we. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D. Keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today, just in time. We've got a lot going on, Julie. This is earnings season.
Yes.
And I think
exciting week.
it's a really important time because it gives us sort of a chance to keep score on what's happening. We've seen J.B. Hunt's earnings, we've had Volvo's earnings. Prologis had so we've had really strong earnings. I think we actually have a graphic on the earnings season so far. Tonight, we hear from Triumph.
Yes.
Triumph's one of the largest factoring companies in the space. They're also, they've got a payment network, so we're gonna hear from Triumph. We have Aaron Graft on tomorrow. He's the CEO and founder of Triumph Capital. So we'll hear tomorrow.
Yeah. Then before the end of the week, we also have quite a few railroads earnings. We have, we have HOPTEK, but then we have CSX, Norfolk Southern, and UP, all reporting before the end of the week. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot about, at least, I don't know if they'll comment on it, but we'll hear a lot about the transcontinental merger. And, next week, we have our rail summit, which is
Tuesday?
Great because we're going to go into a whole conversation about the rail industry and the future of railroads. The Future of Rail Summit symposium will be broadcast on trains.com and part of Trains Pro as well as FreightWaves. We've got some fantastic guests here from the major railroads, as well as the head of the STB. In a pre-recorded conversation, I had the chance to actually visit with the head of the STB. They're the regulator that's really responsible for keeping the railroads moving, but also keep them a little bit honest.
Yeah, Service Transportation Board, right? STB.
They do that, that's right. And so the STB's role is to be the primary regulator. And one of their responsibilities is to really oversee price and to make sure that the railroads are charging a fair price to the constituents. So we get into that. When we talk about the importance of American railroads, I love the railroads, by the way.
So that's on Tuesday, the 28th.
That is on Tuesday.
It's a virtual event now.
It is
correct?
a virtual event.
And it begins at 9 Eastern.
You can tune in right here on FreightWaves, as well as Trains Pro will have it. But I don't think there's a more important sector of the economy in the industrial part of the economy than the railroads. And what's really interesting is this high concentration of market share that the railroads have that frankly truckers don't get to enjoy. The only other market that has that level of concentration is the container market. And you see how much pricing power the container businesses do. The difference is we have a responsible regulator in the STB. The ocean container businesses are quite different. They're sort of exempt from all those rules, and they don't have, the Maritime Agency MARAD is supposed to oversee it, but they do a really weak job. I think our rail regulator is doing a much better job, and it's really interesting to sort of dive into it. I found the conversation quite fascinating. It was pre-recorded. High energy guy, by the way. I love interviewing people who have high energy. He loves the railroads.
Good. I can't wait to hear it.
Absolutely loves the railroads, and I'm excited to share that conversation with you, and we will have it next Tuesday, so tune in for that. So lots of stuff happening, Julie.
Yeah, all good stuff.
Let's talk food. I'm hungry. It's time for lunch, but nobody better to talk about the state of food and food transportation than Brian McGowan. He is the CFO of Armada, one of the largest suppliers to the food and restaurant industry. Brian, welcome to FreightWaves Today.
Hi. Good to see you.
So you're not going to make us hungry, because I'm already hungry sitting here. I've learned not to eat lunch before I go on air, because if I do eat lunch before I go on air, I just become a slog. So every day I wait till 2 to have my lunch. But you guys are so important for the food service industry. You provide the backbone and logistics for this industry. We'd love to hear a little bit about what you're seeing right now.
Well, what we're seeing is quite a bit of promotional activity. We at Armada, we're a supply chain solutions company. But what I really love about our company, and after being here 19 years, is that we're not just providing solutions, but we're actually executing and doing. So with all the warehouse space and all the transportation that we provide, we can really provide great solutions for our restaurant clients as well as other clients in different industries. So mainly in our restaurant area that we specialize in, there's quite a bit of promotions that you see from a lot of different restaurants, which I'm sure you've enjoyed, and maybe you're going to enjoy that this afternoon.
Brian, you're a massive company that very few people in our industry perhaps know about because you focus on this sector, the restaurant sector. We all benefit from the work that you guys do, but you work with the largest restaurants in the country. Tell us a little bit about who your customers are and what exactly you guys do for them.
The top ones are QSR restaurants in the quick serve industry. You're familiar with McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, also in fast casual, Panera, for example, even Darden, another big one, but more in a casual setting. Our services include not only warehousing, distribution, redistribution, freight brokerage, managed transportation, technology, visibility, track and trace. There's a number of different solutions that we provide. So it's a great place for a customer to come to us and where we can provide full visibility and execute on their supply chain to help save them money, especially in a time when you see so much inflationary activity over the past 5 years.
And is it really the specialty, because restaurants' supply chain is very different than grocery? We've talked about it on FreightWaves, is just how that's an entirely different supply chain than what you see in typically the packaged goods industries that are sold at grocery. That's really where you guys focus, is that restaurant distribution.
Yeah, a restaurant's a big piece of it. It's not all of it. There's some automotive, there's pet products, there's a number of different other industries that we're involved in, also some international business that we do. But in that restaurant, it is definitely unique. Everybody's used to dry or ambient type of services for transportation and warehousing, but when you're with food, all the freezer temperature, and there's high visibility. I mean, you've seen recently the issue with lettuces come across and what happened in other restaurant brands. There's a safety factor too. So yeah, the restaurant industry definitely provides you some different challenges, as well as I mentioned the promotions. So the very, very busy, high promotional activity right now for restaurants to be more competitive, bring more traffic into their restaurants, and to get that competitive edge.
So Brian, in addition to all of these complications and solutions that you guys all provide, certainly supply chain leaders are watching the volatility in the diesel market right now and the rising prices, leaving them to decide if they should hedge or ride it out. So how are you all looking at that and approaching that in your business?
Yeah, something I'm very close to. And you talk about somebody that's passionate about something. Definitely, fuel hedging is right at home for me. With all the transportation that we provide, and our business probably covers about a little bit less than 1 million truckloads a year. And with the ability of managing a lot of that freight, we have the ability to provide a fuel hedging service to a lot of our customers. And there's a number of them that take advantage of that service. And that fuel hedging, the strategy, especially for our restaurant clients, is to make sure that the menu pricing isn't going to be impacted by what's going on in, say, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, nobody wants to see any of their products going up because of that issue. So, yeah, this fuel hedging service that we provide can provide the predictability and consistency related to fuel pricing. Almost works as somewhat of an insurance policy that clients can take advantage of, again, so that they can manage all that risk.
So we've talked a lot. You brought up the Strait of Hormuz. We've certainly talked a lot about it on the show. We just had John Kingston on talking about it as well. Would you share your view with us on sort of what's happening there and how that is factoring into the spike or at least volatility in the price of diesel? Sure.
As well, as you've known, I'm sure you've had guests on the show that has talked about 20% of the oil goes through the strait, and before the war started, we were really enjoying diesel prices at, say, $3.75 a gallon, and at the peak during the war here, they went up about 50%. I think $5.64 a gallon was the diesel price that we saw take place. Such a surge, and it's such an increase in cost for shippers. But then you saw it's just gone back and forth. It seems like every day there's a headline out there where Iran's going to do something else, another threat. Then you hear there's a memo of understanding or misunderstanding. So, how did that work out? Then Trump is again threatening, to take out more of the infrastructure, and after we dipped down to what was about $4.60 a gallon not too long ago, now we're up to like $5.13 a gallon. So, and then Brent flips over into the 90s again. So this fuel hedging program, to be able to, watch what's going on, be really close to what's going on in the market. We have a great fuel broker that helps us manage a lot of the contracts to do the hedging for us, to get some good intel on what's happening in the market, and to take advantage of dips like we saw based upon news stories that can give our customers another competitive edge on a lower pricing. It's really played out.
Yeah, and Brian, ultimately, this is all about price certainty, a bit of price insurance, even though you're not allowed to use that word. The CFTC gets mad at you if you use the word insurance. It is really about protecting yourself from the volatility of the product and really neutralizing costs. So taking the opposite side of your natural exposure is really just a way to ensure that you have consistency. And for food companies in particular, where margins are relatively low, it's a volume game, particularly QSRs, it's about having price certainty. I mean, they're already dealing with volatility in food. I mean, beef prices are at substantial levels. Chicken has moved all over the place, eggs. You're talking about lettuce and just the overall impact to foodborne illnesses. It's a lot of things being thrown at restaurants, and it's a very low margin industry.
It is. Even the labor market too. Now the labor market offers a lot of challenges. Labor market's tighter. The rates are getting higher. So yeah, these businesses are definitely challenged. And having even though fuel maybe represents only 25-30% of the total transportation costs, it's impactful.
What's about predictability? I mean, Brian, like you said, there's a number of things that are being thrown at restaurants. What is the impact right now you're seeing with the lettuce scare? And I know there has been some question about is it more than lettuce, but that seems to be getting the headlines is lettuce itself.
Yeah, lettuce has the headlines, and for our business, we're not super close to the produce. I mean, there's some produce that we work with, but really that's been out of our range.
What about GLP-1s? Another sort of headline is the idea, we talked about this extensively. I'm a user of GLP-1s. I've lost a lot of weight.
He's an evangelist of GLP-1s.
I'm an evangelist because I believe in it. It's not just like, I believe in it because I've seen the health impacts it has on my own, my own health and vitals, as well as family members, as friends. Just the fact that you can now take control of your health in ways that we haven't been able to do so, I think is a tremendous thing. But it does impact the restaurant sector. They're the ones that fill it. What are your thoughts? I mean, there's a lot of new protein products that the restaurants are coming out with. How are they sort of navigating this territory?
Yeah, we do hear about the impact of that, and congratulations on some weight loss and success that you've had with it. But what we've heard from more of our restaurant customers is that the customers still want to come out for the restaurant experience. So it's not as if, which we had originally feared, that we would see a decreased demand from our restaurant customers, but they actually want to come out and see and experience, going out to the restaurant. Now the choices that they're making at the restaurant, we have seen some impact at that level, but again, from a volume standpoint, we haven't seen that GLP-1 impact.
Yeah, I think portions are smaller.
I was just going to say, to me, it always goes back to portion control. I mean, I've always said that, but even it's
I mean, it's hard, though. If you're someone who genetically, sort of born to eat, my family. And my father has been on GLP-1s. He's a diabetic. He's lost it. I saw my aunt, she couldn't walk in the last 8 to 10 years of her life due to diabetes. My grandfather. So my family genetically predisposed. And that's, I was certainly on the track to be pre-diabetic. I was pre-diabetic. This has sort of given me control over my life again. I notice as I taper, though, that appetite comes roaring back, and I just, it's just built into you to do it. So I've got to be on maintenance. I'm not taking as much as I used to. But the thing is, it's all portion control. And what I find is I'm still having the same number of meals, but the choice is largely more protein-based, because you have to. In fact, the recommendation by every doctor I've talked to is to make sure that you're consuming enough protein, because the natural inclination is not to consume enough food. But I've noticed that I find certain foods to be, I'm able to enjoy them more, and other foods I have zero appetite for. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole shift happening, Julie, in this whole supply chain. That's GLP-1s, fuel, and the volatility.
Yeah. Let's go back to two of your largest food service accounts. They went into the spike early, hedging like 70 to 75% of their fuel spend. So what did that protection look like? How did it play out? Give us an example of what I assume was a benefit in this case.
Sure, yeah, and in a couple of these cases that you were just referring to, the strategy behind the fuel hedging is to try to put on maybe 80 to 90% of the coverage. So what I mean by coverage is you look at it, if there's 100,000 miles that we're working with, like we want to have 80 to 90,000 miles of that covered under this fuel hedging program. And over the time, over say a 2 year, 3 year period, as we look out, always trying to grab some positions that are advantageous, whether it's dips or even look at it from a kind of like a 401k program is, every month we're going to take a little position, because nobody can pick the bottom all the time. So that strategy and discipline of picking dips and then a routine or systematic type approach with the customers that we work with for both of these has yielded such a benefit this year. As we look at it now, we're almost a $9 million benefit that we've been able to pass on to customers just from this fuel hedging program and seeing this spike. And it's really helped keep the that inflation factor down, and this spike that we're seeing has really been able to neutralize it.
So Brian, is it more about sort of long-term discipline and this being part of your strategy, regardless of what's happening in the fuel market, than arbitrage? And if so, is it, if someone is looking to potentially hedge fuel, is it too late? Have they already missed the window since we're already kind of in this volatile diesel market?
Yeah, it's funny how when prices are low, nobody's picking up the phone to call you. But when prices go up, they want to hear about the program. And sometimes we're a little late to the party now. But I would say it's never too late to get in, because you don't know when these dips are going to happen. Like I mentioned, the first week of July, we saw a dip. We took a couple positions for customers during that week. And now, as we think about July closing, things remain where they are. You're in the win column, and you've just protected yourself. You've just created some great risk management wins.
Brian, I think the mistake or the issue a lot of people have with hedging is they do it, to your point, the wrong time. They wait until fuel's already high, then they hedge, and then they lose, quote unquote, on the paper market, they're losing money because price of fuel comes down, and they look at that and say, oh my God, I've lost, quote unquote, lost money. The reality is it's just about price certainty. That's what it comes down to. You're offsetting where you're naturally exposed. How do you convince customers when they look at their quote unquote paper losses that they need to look at it as about consistency in price and not about this sort of paper? Because you're supposed to lose money in the paper market or gain in the paper market. This isn't a trade. You're not speculating on the price of fuel.
Yeah, you have to be into it long term. You have to have that vision of what the long term game is. And one of the things that we've been able to show is with the program is a stability. We've been able to show the standard deviation of what the fuel prices that the customer has paid versus what the fuel prices have been in the market. And we've cut that standard deviation in half with this program. So you can see over, we've been doing this for 18 years now. And you can see that over that period of time, how we've been able to keep prices very stable and predictable by using the program.
Yeah, lots to talk about. I mean, it's so interesting, the stuff that gets thrown at the supply chain. Chris O'Brien, new CEO, came from C.H. Robinson, is where some of our audience may know him. I understand he's looking at really bringing some new technology to the business, thinking about things differently, really trying to raise the profile of Armada. I had the opportunity a couple of, just 2 weekends ago, was it last weekend? I was at the World Cup with Pallet, and I believe it was your former CEO was in attendance. He's now vice chairman. And we got to talk about AI. You guys are using a lot of AI technology implementing throughout your organization using Pallet. Any comments on that? Sort of what the impact is?
Yeah, a variety of. So not only do we see some impact on and as a CFO, I get to see some of the impact, the direct impact of this is on the productivity side within transportation. And we have some really cool tools that are coming out, some innovative tools that we're going to be implementing this summer on helping being more productive within our transportation group. Also, there's some technology within our warehouses that we've been using to help minimize product loss. That's helping make things more predictable, and also on the visibility side. That's what's happening in your supply chain. And what's interesting about that one is to be able to see in advance of when there's going to be stockouts, when there's going to be risk, when that supply chain is going to have a problem, so that we can exercise other type of opportunities or other solutions to help mitigate those stockouts for our restaurant clients.
Yeah, it was, the days run so, I'm such a blur with the
so
show.
less than 2 weeks ago.
It was the Norway England game was where we spent. It was a great time. I got to enjoy hearing the story of Armada, what you guys are up to, how you're thinking about growing the business, and how you're looking at diversifying the customers that you guys have. And again, the technology, I think, speaks for itself. Brian, thanks for joining us today. Lots going on. We'll have to have you back to tell us more about what you guys are doing on fuel, as well as, I think we could always talk about food.
I could, especially
I mean, that's the problem with this show, is it makes me hungry. I should eat before we come.
Especially if you're having at lunchtime.
I know, but one of the interesting things about McDonald's, did you know McDonald's gets a bad rep, but they rarely have foodborne illnesses compared to some of the other foods. And a lot of it has to do with the
consistency and quality.
Consistency, their processes, their industrial. It gets a bad rep, but if you look at it on a return on calories, the dollars that people spend, McDonald's should get a much better deal. I mean, a much better rep than it does. You don't see a lot of big foodborne illnesses. That's also the reason Donald Trump apparently eats McDonald's, is because he knows he's not going to get sick. At least that's what the White House says. We'll be right back with more FreightWaves Today. Stay with us.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do we. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D. Keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. It's a treat. We're going to invite Marc Held. He is a seasoned veteran founder of multiple companies with multiple exits. He's going to tell us all about what he's up to with HOPTEK. Marc, welcome to FreightWaves Today.
Thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, we love having you. I got to ask, we have earnings for Triumph Financial tonight. We'll have Aaron Graff, the CEO and founder of Triumph, tomorrow on the show. You helped sell a business, green screens, to Triumph. Any comments about that transaction that you want to share with us?
I think the Triumph folks are super smart. The green screens folks are super smart. They're doing stuff that the industry absolutely needs and the industry needs more of. So very excited to see what Aaron and his crew kind of are talking about tomorrow. Very bullish on the future of finance within the world of freight.
Well, I think that's, certainly not a lot of depth in terms of you're going to keep your comments closer to the vest. That's okay. You had been across this industry. I mean, you were at Turvo. You had some with Turvo. You were involved there. Got purchased by Lineage, I think 2 years ago. Obviously, Turvo had, this big history. A lot going on, a lot of noise around Turvo, but has gone on to leave a very successful life with Lineage. And then you also were a part of a business that sold to the Daily Mail Group. Daily Mail, one of the world's largest and most important media publishers out there. Frankly, a very big investor in a lot of data services. People don't realize just how active the Daily Mail Group is.
Yeah, very interesting to see. You'd be shocked. I mean, I think this is part of the strategy to diversify the business. You've got, what everybody thinks of as the Daily Mail, and then all of the other intelligence businesses that I guess if you're trying to peddle, headlines in kind of tabloid journalism, you got to diversify with other intelligence stuff. So I think they own an energy intelligence, or they did at the time. They own an energy intelligence business, some real estate intelligence business, really interesting business.
Yeah, Genscape was their big, in fact, when I was starting Sonar, FreightWaves, I looked to the Daily Mail Group and some of their investments. Just looking at Genscape, the business that was there, and trying to get to know, really fascinating business. Now DMG is really the group, but they're much, and this is not uncommon in big media conglomerates. Hearst has been a very active investor in non-publishing assets. Running a media business, it's a very difficult business, but the derivatives is doing something other than media typically, and you do see big media conglomerates that end up moving beyond media, and it's interesting. So, Marc, you're at HOPTEK. Tell our audience what HOPTEK is.
Sure. So HOPTEK is an AI native freight monetization platform that helps carriers find and accept the right freight at the right price at the right time. And generally that's spanning from sourcing to tender decisions kind of in an automated fashion. Happy to tell you more about some of the products that we just recently launched, but you can think of us as basically stepping in on behalf of carriers, kind of looking across all of the universes of freight that are available, and kind of monitoring inbound tenders so that carriers can make as much money as possible. And for us, we look at that world with a few different lenses. It's not just about, looking at one specific piece of freight. It's kind of looking at it in context. So, do I have an asset available? Have I met contract commitments? What's the spot market look like? So interesting problem space for sure.
Yeah, based on your successful background that we talked about, what made you decide this was the problem you wanted to solve? This is what you wanted to look at and try to put a solution in place for?
Yeah, so the first one I did was in the international maritime space, where we were tracking shipping containers for shipping lines and eventually using that data to make predictions about commodities markets. Because it turns out if you can predict what's going to happen at a port, it has a high correlation to what's going to happen to iron ore. So we did that. Then I did another one where we were helping large manufacturers basically try to figure out how to move inventory through their supply chains faster. And if you're someone like Procter & Gamble, a day of inventory time is worth $80 million. So if you can shave off a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, very easy sell. And we ended up doing a lot of data intelligence work. That was a company that ended up getting acquired by Turvo, stuck around a little bit, ended up helping out some friends, try to do some work in the predictive freight pricing company. That was Green Screens, which got acquired by Triumph. And afterwards, I got super excited about the asset world. Generally speaking, I've seen a lot of folks touch things in international. I've seen folks touch things in brokerage, but asset generally has been that kind of one area where people just don't invest a whole lot of money. It's kind of the undersold. It's less sexy, I think, to the venture community. And I got super excited about the stuff that the HOPTEK team were putting together, and knew I needed to be part of it.
So Marc, you're someone who I've known to come in with businesses when they get established, have some product market fit and really take them. You've also been into businesses that frankly had struggled. I mean, you look at Green Screens as a business that you were brought in to really figure out what the next path of that was. Arguably one of the most successful exits in freight history, freight tech history, traded at a very high multiple. Relative to the size of that business. What do you think gives you the magic touch in these businesses?
This is the first time I'm ever hearing this. I am grateful for someone saying that. But for the record, I mean, it was the Green Screen stuff was all Dawn and her team. Dawn, for those of you who don't know, is one of my favorite folks in the industry. I happened to be involved at the beginning to kind of shift some of the focus of the company, but like Dawn and the crew really ran with it. I think I learned about myself. I'm an okay 0 to 1 human. I have built things, I've sold things, but unfortunately I have a huge amount of ADD. I mean, I don't know if you've seen me playing around with these fidgets on my desk here yet, but generally speaking, if the universe of things to do is smaller, I tend to do well. And so I think starting a company from the ground up, the universe of all of the possibilities that exist, do I do this? Do I do that? Do I sell to this customer or that customer? It just is overwhelming and I get super excitable. And unfortunately I have a lot of energy. So I think once the companies kind of make it to a point where there is something real, I think that's just been my little bit of superpower. Just use that energy.
I mean, the interesting thing is you're sort of a stage 2, we'll call it, of a business coming in at Series A. But then really trying to help the investors create a liquidity event based on your track record. I mean, you're a young guy with 3 exits. What is it about that really drives you in terms of taking that business and not like so many other executives that sort of stick it out for many, many years? And frankly, those are the most difficult part of a business is not, stage 0 to 1 is this sexy. For a founder like myself, it's the fun piece. It's also the hardest. A lot of luck has to be on your side. Stage 1 to sort of that second stage tends to be the one that requires some operating discipline, but it doesn't, you're building businesses really for the purpose of exit. Is that really sort of the playbook that you've been driving?
I think I kind of accidentally fell into it. It, wasn't something that I intentionally went on. I, had some success that pivoted into some other stuff. And it turns out that, again, I guess with my ADD brain, having those constraints where, you're coming in to do a specific thing, you've got some technology, it's got some sex appeal to it. Now, how do we make sure that has the best outcome for the time frame that makes sense? Because I mean, y'all are in the log tech universe. There have been a lot of dollars that have been thrown into companies, and I think there is something interesting about not just being able to raise money, but find an outcome so that the investors actually get their money back. That, to me, is that puzzle that I'm just very, very interested in.
There's a lot of businesses that raise capital during peak times. Supply chain and freight tech is a super hot category. Unfortunately, a lot of investors have not seen return. And we've talked about the fact that this is an industry that does attract a lot of capital, but the number of companies that have exited is actually quite small compared to other more venture-friendly industries. What is the formula that enables a business to exit?
I actually just gave a talk about this. I think there's really only a handful of reasons why someone gets acquired. It's, you've got some IP that's interesting. You've got a team that is really a bunch of rock stars. You've got customers that are particularly interesting. There's a few other reasons, but my favorite reason why someone gets acquired is, the FU factor. I'm going to buy you so that no one else can have access to you. And generally, there's, you can orchestrate a story. This is one of the things that I really appreciate about public companies, in that they generally tell you what their strategy is. They kind of have to, is as part of their announcements. So, if you're a smart human, read the reports of all of these public companies to figure out, what are they looking for? How are they thinking about, do I need, am I a public company? Am I trying to grow revenue? Am I trying to build more products? That effectively gives you the playbook to have an outcome that makes sense.
So how do you prepare a company for that potential? Look, there's so many businesses out there. Talked about, the fact that perhaps thousands have been venture funded over the years at all stages, but the number of big public companies that are acquiring is actually quite small. The universe of public companies in logistics technology, we count, I believe, 72 companies in our public universe that we track. That includes big trucking companies, railroads, et cetera. There just aren't a lot of these big public companies that are acquirers. What is the secret to positioning a business to get acquired? I mean, you said it's the FU factor of, I want to own this so bad. Is it a distribution element, or is it a feature element that really drives the outcomes?
I think it depends on the type of company. The interesting thing about logistics technology is that, it has implications in not only transportation companies, but you've got software companies that get impacted by it. There's a world where you sell to financial services. There's a world where you sell to insurance. Logistics is kind of this core signal that I don't think a lot of people realize has implications outside of just, how do I get something from point A to point B? I think the universe of, transportation companies that would acquire folks is relatively large, but if you, expand it into financial services or insurance or even, other data providers, it just, it expands the scope to, I would hope, more than 70 folks. But I would also argue that there are a lot of large companies that are also not public. That one's a little bit harder to get information about what the strategy is, but this is why, as a good CEO, you got to just be talking to the corporate development people. You got to be talking to basically anybody that you would potentially partner with.
Oh, it's never been easier with Claude. To go figure out and do market research, it is so easy to put Claude on the task of saying, how do I position my business? And really, a lot of it, as you've talked about, is the fact that you're positioning these businesses in a way that makes them attractive for an acquirer.
Mm-hmm. And it's exactly like a sales process. The same thing that you would do to sell a product to someone, same story for an acquisition. Actually, I would say it's probably more like raising money than selling, in that, FOMO is something that is equally important for raising money as it is, having an acquisition. But it's all just a process.
All right, Marc, so I want to talk about HOPTEK's load acceptor. I ran a team of 140 customer service professionals accepting freight all day, every day. So I really want to understand, what happens at the point of tender? How does it work?
Right. So HOPTEK, we started out helping companies effectively find freight. That was our first major product. We were basically filling backhaul for trucking companies. And as we started to understand more and more about the decisions that happen on a daily basis for asset-based carriers, we realized that, at this point in this market, volume and velocity have kind of outrun the human operator. I think every tender is a live decision on a clock. You have to figure out, to accept it, accept the load, decline the load, reprice, reroute. And that really means, if you miss the window, you effectively lose the load. So with all of that in mind, if I'm someone that's responding to a tender, I need to keep in mind, where are my trucks going to be? Have I met my contract commitment for Walmart? What's the spot market look like? What's my relationship looking like? And the fact of the matter is, no single person in any of these companies holds that information in their head. And so what that ends up happening is, margin starts to leak one fine ticket at a time. I want to get the load tendered. And so we basically built a bunch of tooling that effectively creates a fingerprint of the business strategy of these asset-based carriers. I mean, every carrier has a bunch of rules that they operate under. I never want to move hazmat. Walmart always says yes. We always say yes to Walmart no matter what. We want to bid under the market to win this lane, and then we want to compete on service. Every company is different. Every company has assets that are kind of scattered all over the place. So we help build this fingerprint of the business strategy, and as tenders are coming into our customers, we're helping them decide, hey, I could be making more money somewhere else on the market. I've already accepted this many loads. These are what my contract commitments are. And by codifying all of the rules of this business, we're effectively making it so that you're accepting fewer bad loads, more good loads, and responding to tenders basically immediately. And the impact is that a 2 a.m. decision is just as good as a 2 p.m. one.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me, and it's a lot of what we tried to do by setting up what should be auto-accepted, what should actually be worked by a human, what factors they should take into account based on market rates and all those things. I've been saying at Sonar for a while that in this freight environment, tender acceptance is probably the most important part of the equation that you absolutely, shippers are watching it because they're causing you, but if you're actually trying to either be profitable as a carrier or make margin as a broker, it's the most important part of the equation, because you don't want to over-accept at a contracted rate if you could be doing it.
I mean, the problem is there isn't a backstop in this economy because there isn't capacity. So if you reject the load in the routing guide, the shipper, in a soft market, they may not care. In fact, they may get a benefit, oh, well, you've rejected my load that I was going to pay 30 cents a mile more than the spot market. Today, it's a very different situation. You're going to cause that
and the backup carrier is not going to take it either, right? In a down market, maybe they rolls the second carrier who's got a penny more a mile in this rate. The backup carrier is not going to take it anyway.
So Mark, is it really using AI? How are you guys really helping companies manage this?
So I also just wanted to put out one extra, benefit of all of this, in that, by accepting the right load, you've effectively reduced the amount of optimization that needs to happen after the fact. So a lot of tech exists out there to figure out, how do I route these trucks? How do I make sure that my drivers are getting to where they need to be, at the right time? That is a hard problem in and of itself. Our hypothesis is that we can effectively solve that problem by, affecting that at the tender acceptance level. And we're a bunch of nerds. I built a bunch of data companies. You throw all the buzzwords, AI, ML, LLMs, long short-term memory. Odds are we're probably doing something in those universes for our customers to basically help them figure out what are the rules that I need to do to operate, as well as looking at forecasting. How do we do these price transformations? So huge data problem to solve these tender acceptance issues.
Yeah, I don't know that the tender acceptance can solve those problems down the road for planning in every case, because there are always going to be exceptions and things don't go as planned, but certainly should be able to make that optimization down the road easier. I'm wondering, so you mentioned very early in the segment that there's less tech development for asset-based carriers versus, in brokers and all of that. And I think part of it is they're a little hesitant to accept it. So there's always that build versus buy, right? Do I have enough data internally? Can't we just set up auto-accept on our own? So how are you addressing that and showing value in what you're providing over what someone can build internally with their own data and tracking their own commitments?
So I think carriers are the smartest folks in the industry. They've built so much technology that helps them understand how they operate. But I think the thing that makes us different is that we have a slightly different context where we're looking at more than just the assets of our one specific customer. I think, our expertise in data, in fact, one of our marquee customers, Werner, we were able to convince their CTO to join us. So I think we, just by proxy, have been looking at so much cross-customer, cross-industry data that we've become I wouldn't say the experts, but we've become pretty damn good at helping asset-based carriers kind of think a little bit, more expanded than they traditionally would.
So, Mark, you're in Amsterdam. Is this a new home for you, or is this sort of a temporary
I'm just passing through.
What's that?
I'm just passing through. I was literally in Chicago last week. I'm in Amsterdam this week. I'll be back in Atlanta.
One of my favorite cities in the world. Have you been to Amsterdam?
No.
Every person. It's the best.
I have a Dutch last name. I've got to go now.
It's the best city in Europe, in my opinion. By the way, if you get a chance, go to The Hague. There's a place called Rotterdam. It's sort of off the radar. Have you been? Do you know this place? You definitely do it. It's a G-scale layout of like the Netherlands. I recommend it. Of course, I'm a model train nerd. We're building a museum that's modeled a lot after that, but it's one of my favorite places in Europe. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Hey, tomorrow, so I'll definitely check it out.
Go check it out. It's worth an hour or two to go visit. It's absolutely one of my favorite places in the world. Really awesome. Mark, I got to ask one last question. You set up a venture capital called Originator, called Jerk. Tell us a little bit about Jerk.
Yeah, it's basically just a bunch of me and my friends in supply chain investing in supply chain tech. The hypothesis being, I've been investing in supply chain for a while. I'm never going to be the largest investor, but I think between me and my friends, we can all help and provide value in some capacity. Be that, if you're doing something in the parcel space, I've got a bunch of parcel folks that I work with. Maybe I can help connect to, someone at DPDHL or some other parcel company, for example. So,
is there any meaning to the name? A lot of founders would say that VCs can be jerks. Is there any meaning other than just a name that is easy to remember?
Yeah, it's I think the fourth derivative of position. So you've got position, velocity, acceleration, and then jerk is kind of that motion that pushes something forward.
Other people would say it means something else, but that's okay, Mark. We'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for joining us on FreightWaves today. Best of luck in helping companies deal with tenders.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with wrap up the show. Thank you.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do we. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D. Keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
I really like that new commercial for Samsara.
Me too.
It's good. It's got some energy. It's got something. I do love this mascot.
It's got some emotional grab too.
It does. It has. I think it's well done. I love the mascot. I'm a big fan of owls.
Yeah.
There's all like.
There we go.
There we go. I guess I get to be Lou and wear the mascot head. We'll do that on FreightWaves today and celebrate the. His name is Sam, by the way.
Yeah, I love that.
I do. I like, he's keeping an eye on things.
Yeah,
the 360
Samsara,
camera.
Sam.
He's got it. He's fierce animal. Lots of things common with Samsara. Tomorrow, we got a packed house tomorrow.
We do. We have a full show. So we have Nicholas Scheib, Director of Premium Transportation at Circle Logistics, and Andrew global strategy lead for transport and logistics at Zebra. So you won't want to miss that. We have Aaron Graft, the founder and vice chairman of Triumph, here to talk about their latest earnings report. So we've got
Triumph gives us, I like Triumph's reports because they sort of give us the transaction flow in the industry.
Yep.
Tell us a lot about what's happening. He's got their factoring business, they got their payments business. It gives us a really good barometer of the overall spot market. And it's interesting because their stock doesn't trade like a bank. It trades in tandem with the trucking market, which is a fantastic story for a lot of the, if you've been paying attention over the last nearly 6 months, is it the tandem as the spot market heats up, Triumph benefits from that. So we'll hear about that tonight. See you tomorrow.